Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here, episode 2518 of The Tom Woods Show, here with Auron MacIntyre, host of the Auron MacIntyre Show on The Blaze, and also the author of The Total State, which is the book I badgered you all into buying, but you were all thankful that I did so. Over the weekend, I have several email lists, and one is for one of my memberships. And almost at the moment Donald Trump was shot, I was on the verge of clicking send on an email whose subject line was happy, happy news. And then I happened to look on Twitter and I thought, send that one tomorrow. And so instead I sent out a quick email to my main list with that iconic photo of Trump's bloodied face and the flag in the background taken from below, that will be seen and viewed many, many, many times, many, many years into the future. And this is the first opportunity I've had to talk about it publicly. So, Auron, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So there are two dimensions of this. The first is, well, maybe three. I mean, the political implications of it. There's the left's reaction, and and also whether the left's rhetoric led to this. There's that whole thing. There's the, if you really think he's Hitler, are you really thankful that he's doing okay? All that stuff. But then there's the question of, there's a lot of very suspicious stuff about this, and I don't. That's not always my initial go-to. My initial instinct is not always everybody's in on it, but these days I don't see what else you could conclude here. So I do want to slightly go down the rabbit hole on some of the oddball aspects of what exactly happened. But you would think that there would be political implications of this. I mean, I think, at least anecdotally, I can say that some people who had been on the fence, or maybe they weren't going to vote, or they see there were problems with both candidates, like that kind of thing, suddenly seem energized, like, now this just cannot stand, and I am now enthusiastically voting Trump. What's your instinct?
Yeah, you could see several big shifts here. We had a lot of guys who used to be kind of DeSantis diehards once he was out of the race, or once they felt that Trump, who was unworthy of the position, ended up ascending. They were very down on the whole election cycle, thought that this was something that they could not get involved in. You've seen everybody drop this. That there's simply no one who is even slightly right of center who is not on board with Trump at this moment. I mean, you can still have all of the concerns you had previously, but despite the fact that obviously he was just shot at and survived, and that in and of itself would be enough to garner support, his reaction in that moment is really telling. Again, it just doesn't erase all of his personal foibles, but the fact that in that moment, his instinct was not to crawl off of stage, to lie there paralyzed. The man had been hit by a bullet, yes, in the ear, but still, any number of very different reactions would have been totally understandable. But in that moment, his instinct was immediately to pop to his feet, to go ahead and pump his fist, yell fight. That, like you said, that absolutely iconic image. It's really hard, as anybody with a soul, to look at something like that and not say, all right, this is the kind of guy I can get behind.
We should bear in mind that most people, when they go to vote, haven't sat down with a spreadsheet with the candidates' names on it and a series of issues and how they've evolved on those issues over time and votes that were taken or whatever. This is not the way most people think. I mean, a lot of people just go on their gut. A lot of people vote on what we would consider to be quite frivolous grounds. So it is entirely possible, apart from like let's say our little corner of the world, let's say the normie world, it's entirely possible that some people could say, well, there's not a very subtle distinction here between Joe Biden, who seems to be barely clinging to life, and a guy who gets shot and stands right up and lets us know he's okay and pumps his fist in the air and says, fight. I mean, I don't need a PhD in political science to tell which one I think would be more reliable in the office.
In fact, the PhD in political science probably hinders you from making the correct decision. Yeah, that's a huge issue. Of course, both of us are very political people. We're relatively online. We know what's going on, and there is this impulse by people who tend to just swim in this stuff all day to assume that voting politics is an ideological process, but it's not at all. As you correctly point out, the vast majority of people who walk in to a polling place have not thought very much about their vote before they got there. And when you see that kind of contrast, when you see a guy who can barely get through a few sentences without a teleprompter, and then you see a man who takes a bullet and then immediately jumps up and declares that he's going to continue fighting, that contrast is exactly what elections are made of. And so unless you're completely buried deep in the bowels of MSNBC, you don't see this as anything but a very clear indication that Donald Trump is the superior candidate in this contest.
Now, if we think of this in terms of the friend-enemy distinction, I think also something very clear comes out of this. Now, in the 1950s, if you were observing Dwight Eisenhower running against Adlai Stevenson, okay, you might say Adlai Stevenson's kind of an egghead intellectual, but you didn't get the feeling that Adlai Stevenson, wanted you murdered. And Adlai Stevenson, like everybody in the 50s, was reasonably debonair and well-spoken and well-dressed. You didn't have the sense that he was waging a war on you. Those days are behind us. And I think there's nothing that would highlight the friend-enemy distinction better than somebody actually getting shot. And moreover, another person dying. There was, of course, a dad who, protecting his family, wound up dying at this rally. And there's a meme out there that says, it'll have a picture of Trump and it'll say, they're not primarily aiming at me, they're aiming at you, I'm just in their way. And that's not some boomer meme, because, and the way we know that's not a boomer meme is just by looking at left-wing responses to that dad who died. They're all mocking him and implying that he had got what was coming to him, because after all, he was at a rally of a fascist dictator and all that. So that makes pretty clear, well, wait a minute, this isn't just they don't like this one politician. They don't like me either, is what I think some people might conclude from this. And that if they could do this to me, they absolutely would. If it's a capital offense to go to a Trump rally, then I think it's obvious who my friends are and who my enemies are.
Yeah, it's truly an amazing thing. At a moment like this, if we were in any kind of saner time, a previous president who's running again, getting shot and surviving in a heroic manner, would be a moment of celebration, right? That would be an epic moment, something that would draw your community back together, realize how far we had gone, how could we continue to divide like this? A man has been put in this situation and had to go ahead and stand up in this moment and then have the crowd know that he's still fighting for them. That would be something that galvanizes a country in any saner time. But as you said, we are so far down the hole of friend-enemy politics that this is the moment. Like you said, Corey Keppertor, according at least to the Facebook post by his daughter, was a great dad who loved Christ, was a devout Christian, treated her extremely well. And in this moment where gunfire rang out, his first instinct was to force his wife and his daughter to the ground and shield them with his own body before he ended up catching the bullet that might have hit them instead. And, this man obviously is a hero. He covered himself in glory in a moment of incredible fear. And the blood of this man is on the hands of the left. There's really no other way to say that. This man is dead because of the news media, because of the White House, because of the way that the left has framed Trump. And like you said, the left is not mourning the loss of this man. They're not recognizing the tragedy of his loss. They're making fun of him. They're mocking him. These people are animals. These people are animals, and they are planning the next assassin. You're already hearing this from multiple people. The guys from Jack Black's band, Tenacious D, were just on stage talking about how they wish that the guy had hit Trump. We've had multiple political aides, other celebrities come out and say, oh, it's a shame that they missed Trump. Online celebrities, all these people come out and say this. How do you walk back from this? How do you not recognize where this puts your country? This is incredibly, insanely dangerous. These people are absolute animals. And I don't know how you can look at a father dying like that and not understand the heroic tragedy of that moment and how desperately important it would be to walk yourselves back from the abyss that you've obviously been sprinting towards. But these people don't intend to stop.
And then, of course, it's not just rhetoric today about how if only the guy had had better aim and all that, but it's the rhetoric that, as you say, has been escalating in the months prior to this, and that rhetoric, of course, has been absolutely absurdly over the top. It makes me think. I mean, you saw there was the New Republic cover that portrays him as Hitler, and there are all the Hitler comparisons and this and that. I mean, worst Hitler ever by far. But there are all these comparisons, and he's gonna rule as a dictator and all this and that. And I just keep thinking to myself, if a real, authentic right-winger ever got elected, you would be begging to get Trump back. I mean, with all your hysterical nonsense about what he's going to do and what his intentions are. I wish he were a little bit more ambitious in what he wanted to do. I wish he were the kind of guy who would authentically instill fear into evil people. Instead of just into hysterical, unreasonable people. But so there definitely is that in the background. I don't know. I mean, I get that this kind of rhetoric would make, does lead down these sorts of roads. I hate to go down this road of, well, they created an atmosphere of hate and that leads to, because you and I, no matter what the atmosphere of hate is, we would never pick up a gun and shoot somebody. So I don't know how I feel about going down that road, but it doesn't help. It certainly didn't help that they speak hysterically. And the thing is, I get that, maybe Rachel Maddow in her heart of hearts, maybe she does believe this stuff. I don't know. But I consider it impossible that like John Kerry in his heart of hearts really thinks that the danger is that Trump is going to rule as a dictator. I mean, I think what they probably think the danger is that he might in some way be a danger to certain entrenched interests, certain bureaucracies, maybe the military-industrial complex, although he favors pretty heavy military spending. What is it that you actually think? Again, they don't fear he's going to dismantle democracy. What do you think they actually do fear that makes them talk like this? And again, here, I'm not talking about the average person who just follows the leader and repeats the dumb slogans. I mean the political class that's so hysterical. Why are they so hysterical?
So I think they do think he dismantled democracy, but by democracy, they mean their ruling oligarchy. When they say our democracy, they really mean our, as in they possess it. It is theirs. I think there's two things that Trump does that scares them. The first one is that they have built a system. The Leviathan is too powerful. It is too strong, and it is trying to do too much at once. It is trying to hold an inverted pyramid aloft against gravity. The society they've created is so unnatural that it requires total control from them at all times. I mean, you're literally screaming at people and getting them fired if they don't believe men can become women. You can only hold that kind of universe aloft for so long. And if there's even a crack in your power, then you lose it. And Trump represents the possibility of that cracking. Even if he only dismantled a little bit of the administrative state, only if he went out after certain agencies, only if he repealed some of the stuff, they really would see this as the end of their regime because they understand that they need a vast amount of power. But Trump also does something else that they really hate. Trump represents a forgotten set of Americans. He represents American identity as it used to be. And that is something that truly terrifies them. The old, obsolete Americans and the Rust Belt, the working and middle class people who, built this country, they were supposed to just go die of fentanyl. They were all supposed to just fade away. And Trump picked those people up and dusted them off and gave them a voice. And that is probably the worst thing he's done. And they certainly do not want a guy like that in office. I don't think Trump is the guy. I don't think Trump is really somebody worthy of the movement. He inherited it. But that's not really how the world works. World historical forces come to fruition when they come to fruition. And you kind of go with the guy you've got. And I think that's what the moment we're at this point.
Hey, everybody, here's how to unlock a 12% return on silver. Most of the time, you buy gold and silver and you just sit there with it. Now, that's better than what most people do, which is not buying any gold and silver. But thanks to Monetary Metals, where our old friend Jeff Deist is now, you can put those precious metals to work for you. Silver, by the way, is a tangible asset, a great way to diversify any investment portfolio. But with monetary metals, you don't just own physical silver. You own silver that works for you to generate more silver, growing your total ounces over time. Well, as I said, you can now earn 12% annual interest on silver, paid in silver, in their latest offering if you are an accredited investor. Click the link in the description or just head to tomwoods.com/silver to learn more. You've heard me talk about monetary metals plenty. I've had an account there myself for about 2 years, and they are revolutionizing the way we invest in gold and silver. They've been paying interest on gold and silver for over 8 years, and that helps you grow your wealth in real tangible assets. You want a true alternative to saving in the dollar? Well, you've got it. You can generate a yield on gold and silver with monetary metals. Head over to tomwoods.com/silver to find out more. This is happening right at the time, or you and I are talking shortly after Judge Cannon in the classified documents case dismissed that case against Trump on the grounds that the appointment is a Jack Smith, I think that's the name. The appointment of Jack Smith was unconstitutional. And so the whole thing gets thrown into disarray, and we have to dismiss the whole case. And it's interesting that about a month ago, Congressman Thomas Massie asked the Attorney General about that, about the constitutional grounds for appointing a Jack Smith. And he said, I didn't get very good answers. And now, this morning, he says, the case is thrown out on precisely those grounds. So I mention that because they used to say that Ronald Reagan was the Teflon president. Reagan has nothing on Trump. So Trump went into this election year with all these cases against him, and now he's a quote unquote convicted felon, on completely stupid, contrived grounds and all that, and he's got all these other things hanging over his head. Then he actually gets shot, and yet there he is still going. Like they have thrown everything they have at him. And so again, at some level, you would think somebody who's not completely programmed, just an average voter, might wonder, good grief, what in the heck is it about this guy? It's like, I'm sorry to make a comparison to myself, but this is the 20th anniversary of the release of one of my books, The Politically Incorrect Guide to American History. And when that book was condemned by all the right people, but at the time I was a youngster and I thought that was bad for me. These people are, the New York Times is critical of me. But the thing was, when the New York Times said, don't you dare read this book, well, what do you think happened? It had the best sales week of its entire 20-year existence. And so I wonder, there's got to be a little bit of that, geez, they have thrown absolutely every possible obstacle at this guy, and he just won't go down.
Yeah, they try to put his staff in jail. They try to take him off the ballot. They try to put him in jail. Then they shoot him, and still he could. At some point, the mandate of heaven thing just starts to manifest. You start wondering how much of a joke that really is. And to some extent, I think the mainstream, or kind of the establishment left, is starting to realize this. But I don't think they can turn the ship. It's very clear that a lot, all of the very cynically, politically minded campaign guys immediately were like, well, the campaign's over, right? Like, this is just done. You've got one guy who can barely, talk. You've got another guy who literally pops up after being shot and continues to chant fight. Like that should be the end of your political campaign. But the problem is that they have all these really rabid people that they've been whipping up for years. And they all, even if you don't think the core guys, the head guys really believe this stuff, all of the guys behind them do. They absolutely do. The people who are watching MSNBC, CNN, they believe they're fighting an existential battle because they've been told they're fighting an existential battle for years. And for people at home who aren't aware, existential battles mean ones in which you cease to exist if you lose, the ones in which you die if you lose. And the left has been using this rhetoric the whole time. So can you turn that aircraft carrier around on a dime? Can you say, oh, well, guess this guy we've been talking about for, the better part of 8 years as a threat to the future of the country and life as you know it. Nah, he's fine. It's okay if he wins. We really don't care. I don't think they can do that. And you're already seeing that. Like, MSNBC pulled Morning Joe this morning. because they were worried about what those idiots would say about Trump. That's how much they realize that the networks themselves don't even trust their own commentariat, not to just walk out and say like, yeah, wish he got shot. Like they know some idiot's going to get up there and say something like that. That's how bad it is. I don't know if they can turn all these lefties around on this.
My friend Dan McCarthy had an article, maybe the first really thoughtful article on this, almost immediately. And he covered basically everything. But one of the things was the initial media reaction involving, by which he was referring to some of the oddball headlines they chose to go with, like Trump taken away after loud noises at rally, or what was the other one? Secret Service rushes Trump off stage after he falls at rally.
Yeah, falls down. Yeah.
I get that you're gathering information, but as Dan says, if you want to be cautious in your reporting, then you talk about apparent shots taken or possible assassination attempt. He said many phrases could have been appropriate there, but not loud noises or falls at rally. And then beyond that, we've heard that the implication is really he had this coming to him, because of the terrible rhetoric of his supporters and his own rhetoric. So this is where it all ends, in violence. And it's one of those things where you see on social media, multiple social media platforms, people with memes that I think are kind of inspired by Michael Malice, in which they depict all these crazy things the media is doing and saying, and reminding people, you think you hate mainstream sources enough, but you really don't.
Yeah, that's actually my meme. But
I beg your pardon. I'm sorry.
It's all right. Yeah, no, I have the don't tap the sign. You think you hate journalists enough, but you don't. But yeah, no, it's everywhere. You recognize that all of these news agencies immediately knew what was going on. Maybe they wanted Trump to get hit, to actually get killed. But once he wasn't, they all recognized that a near martyred Trump was an absolute disaster for them. That's why initially so many of these reports, not only, like you said, did they use this very strange phrasing as if they didn't know that shots had been fired, as if they didn't know that there was a gunman involved, but they also did things like crop out the American flag behind Trump in those photos. Like they would use the epic photo, but they would go ahead and try to scale it down and crop it to make it less, charismatic, because they understood the disaster for them politically that had just occurred. They knew from the beginning. And that's why I said, I don't think they can turn this around, because as you point out, if the regime really wanted to, this is the perfect off-ramp to the crazy, right? They've been dialing up the crazy for a long time. It's been getting hotter and hotter. They've been pushing things to the max. They've been playing Radio Rwanda nonstop behind us. And if there was one moment where they could say, all right, we're gonna back off. Obviously, Joe Biden's gonna lose anyway. Trump is gonna get elected. There, no matter what, we might as well just go ahead and get behind this guy and say, go ahead and do a pivot where he's dangerous, but obviously, we have to let him. No, they immediately went back to, he did this to himself. If Trump hadn't been wearing a dress that short, he never would have been gotten roughed up. Like that. That's the kind of thing that they immediately dove into. And that's why I don't think that they're going to be able to turn this around. These people are still using the same language right after the man was hit. They're blaming him for getting shot. And where do you go from there?
Hey, everybody, if you're a normal person, this message is for you. That is to say, if you want to use online tools without being manipulated, spied on, or censored, well, I have just the thing for you. As you know, increasingly, Google, Microsoft, Apple, Zoom, and the tech bros running big tech today think your private data is their playground for their advertising networks and AI systems. Well, one way you can avoid all those things is not using the quote-unquote free tools big tech wants you to use. Federated Computer, on the other hand, offers a full replacement for Google, Microsoft Office 365, Slack, Zoom, all the tools of big tech, but designed for people who care about privacy, don't want to be treated like cattle, and want a great price. Everything's encrypted end-to-end, fully backed up daily. We're talking about private email, file storage, group chat, WordPress, all the applications you need for your business or team, all bundled into one easy monthly subscription that's 10 times less expensive than big tech offerings. You get unlimited users, fantastic personal customer support from actual human beings, and the assurance that your data is your data and not big tech's. Visit www.federated.computer for your free 30-day trial and use coupon code WOODS for 10% off your first 6 months. So how about that? A company that thinks its job is to, provide you with services for a great price rather than spying on you or shutting you up or manipulating you. Take your first step with other happy Woods listeners towards digital freedom. Visit www.federated.computer today for your free 30-day trial and use coupon code WOODS for 10% off your first 6 months. Let's talk about a few of the details here because my friend Luke Radowski points out some things, and these are facts that he got from CNN, BBC, NBC, and AP. So, it's not like Joe's blog or something. And so I'm just going to read them to you. And you just put them together and you think, when these things are put together, a certain conclusion seems to be, I feel compelled toward a certain conclusion. And I'm not going to force you out onto a limb, but I don't know what else to, either we're dealing with incompetence at an absolutely, unfathomable level, or something more sinister. So the shooter at Trump's rally was spotted acting suspiciously near the event. Authorities announced over the radio to keep an eye on him, and this info was passed to Secret Service. That's from CNN. The shooter made it to the roof with a full rifle kit as 2 witnesses saw him and say they were telling authorities and screaming about him for an estimated 3 to 4 minutes. BBC. Now, we'll get back to that because we now have more footage from that. A standard sniper spotter team tasked with covering such a critical direction waits an estimated 42 seconds after looking directly at the shooter, allowing him to take 5 shots at Trump. That's straight from the video. The Secret Service decides it's okay to keep Trump on stage for an extended period of time, where he's able to face and actually address the crowd with an active shooter. Secret Service didn't think of securing the high point and advantage area over the event. Police officers located the gunman on the roof and retreated, running away from him right before he opened fire on Trump. And then we have rooftop from where a gunman shot at Trump was flagged as a security risk before the rally. So that was NBC. So we have these sorts of things. And then we just had some more video come out that Thomas Massie, a sitting U.S. congressman, sent out on his social media accounts. And his comment on this was, "What the hell?" ? And the wording is, more video has surfaced showing people yelling at the police and Secret Service, trying to get them to stop the assassination attempt of President Trump. You can see the guy on the roof. You can see there's a guy crawling on the roof. And people are yelling and yelling repeatedly at the authorities. Look at this man on the roof. And he concludes, we may need to come to terms with the fact that the rank and file police and agents were in on this too. I don't want to go down this particular road. I really don't. But where are you on it?
Yeah, it's one of those things, as soon as something like this happens, conspiracy theories start spinning up, right? And the left did this immediately. First thing I heard from the left was, oh, this is staged. Trump did this to himself to garner some kind of support, right? That was the first thing.
Yeah, because he'd get away with that, right? You could get away with that if every single institution is on your side. Right. Otherwise, you can't.
Exactly. But this is what the left had to spin up for them to kind of counteract what they were seeing with their lying eyes. But the right, obviously, you look at this and there are immediate questions about what happened. I like you, I hate to go down this road, but at the very least, as you point out, this speaks to an incredible level of incompetence. When I was a local reporter, we had Barack Obama come to town, and he came out basically to the middle of the swamp to give some speech about environmental issues. And even in that moment, the Secret Service had several elevated, it's the swamp. It's not like there's a building or something. They just carted out these stand-ins and elevated themselves well above everything so they could see for basically miles in every direction. That's the way the Secret Service operates with a president they want to protect, right? And you look at this scenario where there's clearly this high point of advantage that, any guy who's watched a movie for 10 seconds, if they were asked to look around, would be like, you should probably keep a guy on this right here. And not only did the Secret Service and local law enforcement not have it covered, but as you say, this guy approached it, got up there, was climbing around on the roof for multiple minutes with people screaming. There's one video that times the amount of time that these people are screaming while Trump is on stage. Now, at the very least, even if you're not sure what's going on, you pull Trump off that stage. If you're the Secret Service, if it's unclear, if there's any threat at all, you pull Trump off that stage. But it looks like he was able to maneuver up there. We even know that at one point, a police officer went up the ladder and saw him with the kit and then had the gun pointed at him and retreated. In that moment, again, you would at the very least go ahead and clear the president from the stage. But instead, the gunman was allowed to turn around, reacquire his aim, and fire at Trump multiple times. I don't know. At the very least, you have to say that if they went ahead and assigned a team this incompetent to Trump, that itself is malice. Many people have pointed out that the team was, how we say, very diverse.
Yes.
With a number of women who seem uncomfortable with, say, holstering their weapon in a moment. No, don't get me wrong. These people are under fire. I'm not here to denigrate their courage. Like they're obviously doing a very dangerous job. But you have to ask, when they put a team out there that fails that spectacularly, if it's not direct malice in the sense that this was a organized plan, some kind of conspiracy, at the very least, they put Trump out there with the smallest amount of protection they could, with the most inept team that they could, and then said, what happens, happens.
Well, that I know the particular Secret Service agent you have in mind. I don't know her name, but she's not a tall person, and she's a she. And there's another picture of Secret Service agents on top of Trump, and she's cowering behind that pile of people. And it's just, that's not, I mean, I don't know if you watch Seinfeld, but it reminds you of when they thought, they thought there was a fire, and George just runs out in front of everybody, leaving the women and children behind, and then tries to make excuses. I mean, it really is on that level, just not exactly the image that you want. What I want to know is, doesn't the Secret Service, it well in advance of a major event like this, go to the area, scope it all out, come up with schematics to figure out what their plan of action is going to be? And I want to know, if we have those schematics, what was their plan for that rooftop, that particular rooftop? It absolutely can't be that they weren't aware of this rooftop. So either the schematic says nothing about the rooftop, or it says we should be doing X and Y, and they didn't do it. Either way, I don't see how that comes out well. But it so happens that this rooftop that they don't do anything about is one that the average person can pick out and say, well, but hold on a minute, it looks like there's a guy up there.
Not only can the average person do that, they did. Several of them, repeatedly, very loudly to the authorities. Which again just goes to your question. We can speculate at this point, and I really would not blame anybody who sees this as a malicious act. But at the very least, we know that the Democrats were trying to strip Trump of his Secret Service protection. That had already happened. That multiple requests to increase his Secret Service protection had been denied, and that the team that he had is, at very best, the worst team of Secret Service agents to have ever been a part of that organization. And I'm sorry to say that about people whose jobs it is to put themselves between fire and a president. I am not one of these right-wingers who tends to look at military personnel or law enforcement personnel as something terrible. I highly respect people who put themselves in harm's way. So I don't say this lightly. I'm not someone who just says, oh, well, these idiots, but I mean, really, from any objective measure of their job. Like you said, any idiot who has seen a stupid Hollywood sniper movie or had played a video game would have looked around and said, hey, if I was a guy with a rifle, I'd be there, there, or there. And they just didn't even, they're, like you said, either there's a document somewhere that says we don't have to take this in account, or they completely ignored what they're supposed to be doing. Either one is completely unforgivable.
For his sake, I hope he is planning to supplement his security with some private security.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just absolutely wild.
Yeah, if I were Donald Trump, I would be hiring some people outside. It's time to build that Praetorian Guard.
Yeah,
in a very real sense. And this is a terrible thing to say, but as I'm sure you're pushing it too. But as somebody who's talked a lot about parallel institutions and the need for parallel institutions, because every institution has been corrupted. When we say every institution, we mean every single one. No matter how direct and obvious their job is, no matter how clear that they should be the martial caste, highly dedicated to the well-being of the people that they are protecting, even in those organizations, it is corrupted to its core. And so, unfortunately, you really are in a scenario where it is time for anyone who is basically not on the side of the regime to invest in their own security services, because the people who are doing that right now are not up to the task.
The ultimate parallel institution. It's crazy. Have you, over the past 24 to 48 hours, have you revisited, because it's been reposted a number of times, the video of Ronald Reagan getting shot in 1981? And
I can't say that I've re-looked the footage.
But if you do look at it, the contrast is quite striking, because it is immediate. At the very first sound, he is brought to the ground. You can't even see him anymore, because it's all Secret Service people everywhere. You can't even see him, and instantly that happened. Whereas geez, I don't know what the heck to say about this. And then I have an email newsletter, so I have every theory on earth coming into my inbox as to who's behind it and who's responsible. And the thing is, some of the theories sound plausible to me, but I can't. Was this going up the entire chain of command? You're going to have to give me a little evidence before I can jump on that. I mean, I can say I wouldn't rule it out, and I would never say, well, these people aren't that bad, so there's no way they would ever do X. No, they would do X. The only reason they wouldn't do X is concerned they might not get away with it. It's not moral considerations. I mean, the way these people act and behave and think shows us that they have no moral scruples or hesitation whatsoever. So this is the week of the Republican convention, so it's traditionally a week that the party having the convention gets a polling boost. This one is going to be a little bit more dramatic, I think, even than that. But it hasn't happened yet, and we've heard Nikki Haley is speaking, and you could say, well, Trump maybe figures he needs those votes or something. I don't know, but it seems like he has a real prospect of a major boost here. So, I mean, what do you think? Do you think that the prospects of his reelection are actually quite likely at this point?
I don't see how they couldn't be. As you said at the beginning, that contrast between him and Joe Biden is now so stunning, and maybe the Democrats will go ahead and resume talks about replacing Joe Biden, but I don't know who in the world. Maybe Michelle Obama as like their last ditch effort as somebody who could actually beat Trump. But all of the people who are being kicked around as possible replacements for Joe Biden would also lose at this point. I just don't understand. Anyone that they put up against Trump is just going to get mauled, you would imagine, unless things have really gotten so wildly partisan in the United States that the surviving of a assassination attempt doesn't move any of that 50% on the other side. But I think it'll move some. The smart move for the left is probably just to bury Joe Biden's campaign where they found it. He insists on running again. Well, now he's just a sacrificial lamb for an unstoppable force at this point. I mean, the Democrats could delude themselves into thinking that they're going to beat Donald Trump after this, but I can't imagine that's the case. In a lot of ways, the lax security, basically the position that they inevitably put Trump in through their rhetoric, everything that they tried to manufacture, ultimately just produced a stronger Trump, just produced a almost unstoppable force. They have forged Trump into something that he could have never been before this moment. I really hope that changes Trump as a person, but at the very least, it changes him as a candidate. And I think his supporters and even those who were before not really sure if they were on board are going to be full speed ahead at this point.
Yeah, I think at this point he has to understand that although politics is a game of give and take, inevitably, understand that fundamentally these are not people that you make deals with. Which, as I think when he went into office initially, he thought, well, I'm a deal maker, and when there's some kind of a blockage, I can undo that because I'm a great negotiator and I'll work things out. And I mean, you still need those skills, but I wonder if he really is starting to get now exactly what the level of what it is that he's up against. And I wonder if the Democrats at this point, a lot of them are now just switching into inevitability mode that, all right, well, we're going to lose this one, so now we have to plan out how we can obstruct him. Now we have to just get into plain old, flat out obstructionist mode. Some of them have to be starting to plan that way, I would think.
Yeah, the more Machiavellian among them, the people who are probably in charge of the mainstream establishment are starting to understand that. I think you're still going to see a lot of flailing and kicking from the media, a lot from the vanguard. You're still going to have people like AOC screeching about Trump as Hitler, that kind of thing. But I think you will see an adjustment from the center left to recognize that any hopes of kind of shoving Joe Biden's shambling corpse across the finish line are over. At this point, it is just best to win legislative seats, secure as much of a majority as you can, lock down agencies as much as possible. Just like you said, set yourself in the mindset of we're here to once again kind of run interference against Trump for 4 years, not actually beat him in an actual contest, which is probably best for them, because if they had tried to flex the campaign manipulation machine again, I think that probably would have been even more dangerous for them.
What is the obviously you have your show on the Blaze, but is there a place people should go, the best place to go to follow you, like maybe your social media or something?
Of course, yeah. I'm on Twitter. I refuse to call it X.
Me too, man. You and me.
Twitter, Gab, Substack, Instagram, all under Auron MacIntyre. And of course, I've got the new book out as well, The Total State. Tom's been very, very kind to push it. But one more time, I'm contractually required to mention it every time.
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, every year, something like almost 200,000 books come out. If you don't promote yours, forget it. It's going to be lost. So I've just made a note about the Substack. So I'll make sure that on the show notes page, tomwoods.com/2518, and also in the video description, I'll have a whole bunch of MacIntyre links. It'll be a nice MacIntyre smorgasbord for all of you who would like more. Well, I appreciate your coming on here on short notice, but as I said to you through direct message on Indeed Twitter, I will try not to ask you to come on at the very last minute, except after assassination attempts. So let's hope those are minimized.
Yeah. My only hope is that this will be a unique event.
We can all hope for that. Thanks so much, Auron MacIntyre.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com, and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.